Hello, you're listening to the OMG MotoGP podcast with former Grand Prix rider and British champion Keith Huewen and myself, Amy Reynolds. And today we are joined by MotoGP journalist Calum Davis. Calum, it's a pleasure to have you on. Just tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to the world of MotoGP.
So I started watching MotoGP back when it was on free to view, which was obviously back in the day when Marquez had just entered the championship. So that probably shows my age on the younger side of things a little bit. And then it went behind obviously the paywall, and obviously like back in the day you didn't get to watch it. But then we finally got to watch it just before COVID, and then I became engrossed in this incredible sport. And then last year, I was lucky enough to be on work experience with American Racing in Moto2 with Matt and Josie. And then since then, I've been to the British Grand Prix this year and Le Mans as well. So I just love watching it and then writing about it and speaking to the riders at media scrums and whatnot. It's a lot of fun and seeing how everything behind the scenes works. And then obviously what you see on screen is completely different, but it's a lot of fun, and hopefully just getting started as a MotoGP journalist, as you say.
We need to preface this week's podcast and say that you might catch a bit of background noise, and that's because Keith is still on his travels in Thailand. He may return at one point soon, but you've chosen the busiest street in Thailand to join us from, Keith.
There's always a connection in there, and I'm in the city that Mike Trimby originally brought us to. You remember the Macau? Everybody remembers the Macau Grand Prix street race that used to be like a holiday race at the end of every year in November. That Mike Trimby used to organise. The now non-MotoGP legend, of course, recently inducted. Sadly, we lost him at Misano, which is going to be coming up the next round. So it's going to seem very strange, Misano without Mike Trimby there. But the point is the town that I'm in at the moment is the town that we used to do all our R&R. So all these crazy photographs you've got of motorcycle races from the 80s jumping off of roofs into swimming pools and being completely out of control, that all happened here, and it was all down to Mike Trimby. And the bar I'm sat in at the minute belongs to a fellow called Keith Fort. It's called the Caddy Shack, this place. And his son actually came across to the UK to race in Super Sport 1000. We're only this much away from each other in this sport, you know.
Very true. Very true. Well, Calum, you join us on a good week because the Aragon Grand Prix perhaps gave us a little bit more than we were bargaining for. Keith, you and I, we were absolutely way off in our pre-race predictions, but I'm actually pretty glad that we were, because it has meant that Marc Marquez has finally made his way back on top. What a journey that man has been on. Calum, you said you started watching the sport when Marc Marquez joined. So your opinions on seeing him return to winning ways?
I think it was great to see him on the top step of the podium. Obviously, one of those all-time great sporting comebacks. Great to see. And I think I've kind of come to this conclusion that it was all the clouds, all the things aligned for it. Like, you couldn't have had a more perfect weekend. The rain almost every single night just was perfect for him. The track just didn't seem to rubber in at all, which we know Marc prefers over every other rider pretty much. It's insane how perfect of a weekend it was, which, you know, is great for him to get his first win. And I don't want to put too much of an asterisk over it, but I think he needs to win another weekend that's not tailor-made for him. It's so great to see him win on a Ducati, and you know, I love seeing him back on the top step of the podium and in dominant fashion as well. It left no one in any doubt that he is still probably, well, I don't want to say the best, but you know, top 3 rider on the grid easily. But yeah, it's kind of like, was it almost too perfect of a weekend? Can he still dog it out when everything goes against him, like you need to do for a championship?
The answer to that is absolutely yes. I mean, 0.8 of a second faster than anyone else at pole position. Pecco Bagnaia turning around and saying that he's doing something completely different. They couldn't work out how on earth anybody, 0.8 of a second in today's modern MotoGP terms, is from here to the moon. I mean, I'm so in awe. I've never seen anything quite like it. I mean, we talk about aliens, we've talked about it ages, and that was something out of this world. There's no way that other riders can be 8/10 off. New track surface, it was a bit slippery, it hadn't rubbered in, as you mentioned. Rain every night, as you mentioned, absolutely correct. That means that he never gets a chance. Every time you go out on it, you don't really know what you're going to get until you really get into the groove on it, literally a groove. And then if you move off of that groove, you're in all sorts of trouble. Now, Marc Marquez must have had a groove that was different from everybody else's to manage an 8/10 of a second on a lap. I can't express myself well enough to say what 8/10 of a second is in modern day racing. It's another planet. It's a different class. To do it on a motorbike that's nowhere near as good, I think we can say, to the 24 Ducati. The 24 Ducati is damn near a perfect motorbike as we are at the moment. And the bike that Marc Marquez is riding is nowhere near like that. I mean, I've got a big up for Frankie Carcetti. Frankie Carcetti, I mean, a favourite bloke of mine anyway, but that guy has managed it. I mean, he dug Digi's career out of the dumpster. And so Digi ended up with more MotoGP rides once Frankie and co got the Cressini bike working for Digi. And now we've got the situation where Marc is on a crest. And again, if you look back, when was it? July 2020? Was it Jerez 2020 back then when he hurt his arm and basically he's gone through incredible pain, had to have the arm reset by 30 degrees or something to get it back into a working range that makes it work. The whole story regarding Marc Marquez, you couldn't make it up. If you read it in a book, you'd go, really? I'm not so sure about that. Sounds like bullshit. But it isn't. It's the real Marc Marquez. And you can see him winning more this year. I mean, I think Ducati obviously knew that. I mean, getting back to that deal, dumping Honda, that in itself wasn't a small thing. It was a massive thing that he did, having been at Honda for as long as he had. And to dump them, dump the money, dump everything, and realise, the determination of someone when they're prepared to do just about whatever it takes. And I think that is Marc Marquez. He is prepared to do whatever it takes.
People that diminish that decision that he made to leave Honda and say, actually, it's the opposite of being a big decision. It's like he's just taken the best bike on the grid. Calum, can you perhaps shine a bit more of a light on the opposite opinion on that? Because it's huge, it's massive. And like Keith said, that guy has been on a journey, and most people in his position, even professional sportsmen and professional motorcycle racers that are wired completely different to your average Joe. They have that much more grit and determination that when, the odds are against them, like coming back from a huge injury, they're perhaps the kind of people that will keep going at it. But the amount of times he's just kept going is mind-blowing. Most people would have said, do you know what? I'm done.
I mean, for reference, I broke my elbow in year 5 and I haven't played football since. So I could not imagine what he's been through to do that. It's incredible to just have that perseverance. And on that move to Ducati as well. I mean, could you imagine MotoGP now with him still at Honda? Even just as a sport, this incredible marketing legend, this incredible rider who still, even last year at Honda, we knew just had this incredible talent still, despite all of his injuries. I mean, could you imagine him at the back of the grid? Like, if he was in Marinis' position right now, like, MotoGP wouldn't be half the spectacle. Okay, he's probably not in the title fight, and it's not a huge factor in the overarching story of Martin and Bagnaia. But what we will always remember is this race. Like, we'll remember seeing him doing this. We'll remember seeing him all the other chances this year that he's had to be up there, and then he didn't get that win. But just the dominance that we saw this weekend, it's great to see Marc back and him on a competitive bike. To me, that really is second to none. I'm happy to see him back, and I'm happy for MotoGP in the future as well that he's back, because it just makes the sport more exciting, I think.
Let me pick up off the back of that, if I may, Amy. I've been talking with Frankie Carcetti this morning, and he sent me a text just now, and it says, I'll take one part out of it. All I will say with Marc, they have no idea when he has a factory bike. No idea. Those are the words that he said. And I think those words if not prophetic, because I think that most people think that he's going to be pretty spectacular on a factory bike. But that's coming from a guy who's closest to everything that's going on and understands the difference between the bike that Mark's on at the moment and the bike Mark will be on. And so therefore, it sounds to me like, Frankie, if no one else yet in the paddock has realised the fact that these guys are really going to be up against it when Mark's on that. And as an aside, one other thing, he just mentions that it was a shame that really a shame that no one has taken a chance on Jake at this particular point. Because Frankie Carcetti, of course, was Jake's manager. He used to manage Jake and got him his Moto2 ride and the like through Mike Trimby again at IRTA. So again, it's something that we'll all speculate on with the performance that young Jake is in at the moment. Why isn't he in MotoGP? But that I think we'll move to perhaps later, Amy. I'm sure you've got that all lined up.
Yeah, because it begs the question. There's that whole age-old kind of question of why we don't have a bit more of a rider transfer market, which, you know, if it came a little bit later in the season, you've got to think, would Jake have found a seat in MotoGP next year? Anyway, who knows?
You've asked your own question and no one can answer.
Yeah, I know. Keith, I wanted to touch back on something you just referenced about the track surface. Obviously, Aragon had been resurfaced. And I actually remember, I didn't watch all of DawnandMotoGP.com's preview, but I just saw a little clip of Simon saying about the lack of grip. And that was the first kind of sniff that there could be a few things to deal with over the course of the weekend for the riders. We're going to touch on the incident very, very shortly, but Pecco made reference to the fact that the organisers were meant to have cleaned the track overnight. We saw him make two absolutely awful starts, like spinning up. I mean, the exact same thing happened for Pecco in both the sprint race and the main race on Sunday. But Keith, what's your opinion? What could they have done? Anything more about cleaning the track up?
No, I mean, it's a brand new surface at the end of the day. There's certain oils and the like that seep up through it as it settles down. It was obviously just a bit too green at the time. And I think that's where the 0.8 of a second came from with Mark. Mark found a groove there that no one else could find. I mean, I keep saying it's an out of this world type thing. What surprises me is no one else could find that particular level of grip that Mark managed to find out of a slippery track. And the fact that it rained every night. I mean, I got a call from Charlie Hiscott driving in the rain on Sunday morning. Charlie is known to everybody, of course, as the man from TNT, originally in the Part Ferme World Superbikes and at MotoGP as well at one point, and in British Superbikes. But Charlie sent me a message to say, blimey, mate, you're in the right place, or words to that effect. It was absolutely slinging it down on their trip in. And the ride into Aragon is one of them ones where you almost have too much time going to the track at Aragon because all the hotels are quite a long way away from the track. So when you're riding in or driving in obviously for the teams, you're thinking about how slippery the road is and then, what the conditions are going to be like. How are you going to manage that through suspension and tyres? I mean, it's a real conundrum for the likes of the suspension and tyre people to get those things dialed in, as well as all the electronics and the like to make it work in that situation. And again, Mark's team, Grassini, did the outstanding job and gave him a motorbike that was somehow better than everything else, it would seem. Certainly in performance terms it was, with him on it.
Yeah. I think, it's those kind of situations where you see his flat track experience just kind of come into its own, really.
But that's only on left-handers.
Yeah, exactly. What I'm going to move on to now is the incident. There was obviously a racing incident between Alex Marquez and Pecco Bagnaia on the Sunday race. Alex ran a bit too deep, went a bit wide, and when he was trying to come back in, unfortunately, there was a coming together. Callum, let's get your opinion on it.
I'll start by saying, I'll start by saying it was a racing incident. I don't think anyone should have been punished for it. But I think, and I'll also say that there's been a lot of comments on social media, as there always tends to be with this sort of stuff. And obviously it's forced Alex to make a statement, and we don't want any rider to feel like they have to make a statement to defend themselves in situations like this. But what I will say is, I do think Alex should have been a bit more careful. I mean, obviously visibility is not exactly got door mirrors on. You can't exactly see behind you very well on a MotoGP bike. So I get that spatial awareness isn't something that a rider's going to be particularly great at. But you know a rider's behind you, and especially when you've made a mistake like that, gone onto the green surface, you're not going to be up to speed, even though he's not gone off the track. He's made a mistake, and Bagnaia has gone through on him. But Bagnaia is past. I think at that point, Alex Marquez should have just rolled off the throttle. And I always think in situations like this, if you're gonna score, what's better for him? He was gonna finish fourth in that race. There was no way he was gonna finish any lower than fourth. I don't think. Acosta's pace wasn't strong enough to catch him. So I think that Marquez should have just rolled off the throttle and let Bagnaia, scarper down the road. I mean, that was how it was going to finish. So he's lost himself a handful of points, and it's put the championship in a lot of doubt for Bagnaia. So I don't think you should blame Marquez. I don't think there should be any grid drops or anything like that. But I'll just say that Marquez has lost himself a lot of points. And I think the accusations from Bagnaia as well, saying that he did it on purpose, I don't think you don't crash a bike on purpose. No, come off it. I think that's just an adrenaline-filled statement and whatnot. But yeah, they're my thoughts. I don't want to be cancelled, but so don't come for me or anything like that. But I think Alex should have just rolled out.
You see,
the thing is, Calum,
that's the thing about
you.
Go
for Keith.
No, that's the thing about youth, isn't it? I mean, it's covering both sides of the fence and worrying about being cancelled. Whereas when you get to my age, we don't really give a toss. We have to get stuck straight in. At the end of the day, Alex, I mean, you are ostensibly, Calum, I'm not going to tell you under the bus because I think you are pretty much right. But it's always easy to say from a desktop and the like looking in, and you can take either side you like at the end of the day. If you want me to quantify it in numbers, Alex Marquez 60% at fault, Pecco 40%. The way I equate that is that Alex Marquez made the mistake. Pecco naturally got in front of him. Alex knows that Pecco's going to be coming back to the line, but then again, Pecco also knows that Alex, if there's the slightest sniff of stuffing him back under him again, is going to do so. And that's the reason why the racing is, because nobody could rule either way. Somebody being malicious in any way. They were just doing what motorcycle racers do. Rolling out of it for Alex Marquez, I mean, that always amuses me when I hear people say that. Sorry, Calum. It's because it's an impossibility for a motorcycle racer. He thought he was going to be able to get under there. And if he got half a yard further up the street, he would have been alongside Pecco, and Pecco would have had to lift. And that would have been it. He'd have been back where he wanted to be, back in front of him. So it's a racing incident because it presents itself in the way that it does. And it will continue to do that through time immemorial. There are always going to be these situations. But Alex, having made the mistake in the first place, going off track, got the drive to get almost back up alongside Pecco. So I kind of apportion, and we can't do that because it's either a racing incident or it's not a racing incident. Somebody cops a penalty or doesn't cop a penalty. Marquez was 60% at least to blame. And in my view, this is Pecco 40%. But the one thing that we can't get away from is it is absolutely screwed Bagnaia's championship at this moment in time. And I think that brings us on to a very, very, very psychologically interesting subject of Jorge Martin. Now, that boy is doing what you do to win a world title. Every time he finishes a race, he finishes to the maximum of his performance that he can achieve without throwing it at the fence. And if you roll back just a while, you would almost guarantee Jorge Martin would have a rush of blood to the head and throw it at the fence, and doesn't. So I'm very, very, very impressed with the way that Jorge Martin takes the maximum amount of points that he feels he can on the day. And I think that's an impressive change in his attitude, his maturity in MotoGP.
Pecco has now dropped 23 points back from Jorge Martin in the championship. Now, before we had the sprint races, that would essentially have been a Grand Prix. 25 points used to be available every single race weekend. Now that you have that opportunity to get more points with the sprint race, so you can get a max of 37 points like Marc would have done this weekend, is 23 points as much of a hit? Will that make Pecco as sweaty as it would have done a couple of years ago?
Well, he came back from 90 points deficit once upon a time, so no, I don't believe it will. I think the biggest problem is he took a hard hit. You look at the way his arm was being rolled up underneath the bike, and one bike was on top of the other. Misano's a tricky little track, there's no doubt. We're going to be there twice this year. That's where we go this weekend. So the proof of what the consequences of that accident are going to be proved this coming weekend. We are going to see whether Bagnaia is fit enough to perform and whether Jorge Martin can take advantage if he's not.
I will just say Jorge Martin hasn't gone more than 4 races this season without a no score. So we are due a Martin DNF at some point in the next 2 races, I'd imagine. So, if we do get that no score in a Grand Prix and Bagnaia gets the win, I mean, we're talking it's roles reversals again, and then there'll be a preview podcast saying, is this finally the race where Bagnaia can march on? So do you know what I mean? It swings so much more than we ever have seen before in MotoGP. I mean, look at motorsports in general. The world in general is volatile, but motorsports, I mean, there's talk that Norris will come back and beat Verstappen in Formula 1. So, and that's a much bigger percentage swing. So I genuinely, I don't, the title's far from over. And I do think that Bagnaia, I think he's got it's less physical. I know what you're talking about, Keith, but I think it's more mental for Bagnaia. I don't think he's, obviously last year was quite tough, and he was behind at times in the battle last year. But I don't think he's ever really been this, I don't want to say screwed, but he's never had this pressure on him before to almost come back from so much doubt. And I think obviously there'll be all the politics of Ducati behind it that is probably not even worth going into. But I think Bagnaia's just got to shut up, stop making outlandish accusations, and just ride, because we know he's got the pace. On his day, he's unbeatable. I think on that bike, and him as a rider, I think he's probably the best combination at the moment. But he's just got to shut up and do it. And at the moment, there's not enough of that, I don't think.
I would say, though, that Pecco isn't normally a guy that does throw a few kind of swipes and jabs in. He is normally fairly level-headed. No matter what tends to get thrown at him, it is very rare that you will see Pecco make those kind of jabs. So perhaps that does say a little bit more about where his head was at after that.
Yeah, I think he was very much thrown by it, and he knew immediately what that meant for the title. He would have known that Martin was ahead of him. So I think he's just got to regroup. I mean, he's going to a home-ish race. It's in Italy, so I suppose a home-ish race for him. He's just got to relax, I think.
You're kind of missing the point that he was frustrated with the weekend as it was going anyway. They weren't anywhere near like where they wanted to be. So there was a high level of frustration in there anyway, and being taken out by Alex Marquez. And at the end of the day, he was taken out by Alex Marquez. The majority of the mistake, the whole start of the incident was down to the fact that Marquez had made a mistake. So when they got to that, so I can see why he's going to be slightly frustrated. Mentally, I don't know whether I agree yet, Calum, with you there. I think that he is a very strong character mentally, and I think that if he's not, he's in deep doo-doo next year, that is for sure. But he's got Marc alongside him because he's going to need all the willpower that he's got, because he's up against a teammate who is absolutely renowned. It's not just physically tough, but mentally never leaves anything on the table, fights to the very last inch. Good here, isn't it?
Sorry, Adrian.
We got our own Grand Prix out the front here. Yes, I am still sitting on the balcony on probably the noisiest road in Thailand. they're all noisy.
I
No,
think
I
what I
think
would say is Bagnaia is incredibly strong. I mean, all MotoGP riders have to be incredibly strong, but there are a few signs at the minute that his head's just not where it. I'm not going to say where it was, but he's had a few bumps, and he needs to just refocus. I completely get your point, Keith. He's incredibly strong, and at the end of the day, he has a right to be frustrated. His pace wasn't where it was. I mean, he qualified third, and then had to I think they said on the commentary, it's the misfortune of where he qualified. Normally, you'd be delighted with a front row start, but just because of where he qualified, it ruined his weekend. So yeah, I get that he was frustrated, and I get why he's been frustrated. But I think if he just, settles back down, does what he needs to do, like we know Bagnaia can, I still think in my eyes, he'd still be favourite for the championship.
the shock for me was Bastianini to some extent. I really expected him to be a bit more of a performer this weekend as well. Not that he wasn't, of course. He was running okay, but look, I just expected him to be a bit more in the mix of it all as well.
I think he's still just got that yo-yo element. He can be absolutely all over it one weekend, and then he goes a little bit MIA for a few races in a row. The other person I wanted to, well, actually, let's complete the podium. Pedro Costa, with the whole incident between Pecco and Alex Marquez, found himself on the podium. But to be honest with you, the way that Pedro Costa and Jorge Martin were going at it to begin with, I thought there might be something happening there at some point, but they kind of like regrouped and kind of got their heads down a little bit. But yeah, that was quite an interesting point at the race as well.
And the best KTM again, Gas, of course, but Acosta is the real deal. Settling into his rookie year, he's had that little bit of a slump. I call it a slump. It's not really. It's just a bit of realization of how to set things up in new environments, which is what they've been working at. Obviously at Tech 3. A great third. Let's see what you can do when we get to Misano.
I mean, he referenced that it was a one-off because of special conditions. So I think even he's doubting, how true that step up in performance is. But, KTM, third and fourth, albeit probably more realistically a fifth and sixth if it wasn't for the collision, as I think it'll go down in history. But still, like you said, a step up. So yeah, good to see Acosta back on form, I think.
Aprilia had a little bit of a disaster this weekend. They just did not cope well at all with that track surface. At one point, it looked like Miguel Oliveira might give them something to sing about, but unfortunately, that was quite short-lived. What was it? Was it the opening lap he went down, but he was up in sixth?
It was a bit of a weird one, really, the whole thing, wasn't it, for Aprilia? Because I have to say that a low-grip track, I was expecting just that little bit more from them. And Trackhouse had, the independent team for Aprilia, they too had a bit of a mare of a weekend. They'll be scratching their heads, that's for sure.
And I think, Oliveira had a good weekend, but then went down. It was just a case of they just didn't get, I think it was the rear wheel. They just weren't happy with it at all. And I think Vinales almost retired due to fears of his own safety at some points. Like, he just didn't want to even ride that bike anymore, which, if your bike's that bad, you don't really want to see them risk it. It's confusing for Aprilia because at times it's almost like Maverick Vinales is infecting the characteristics of that bike. At times it's brilliant and a world beater, and then other weekends it just doesn't want to be. It wants to move to the next race. So it's really weird how Aprilia are developing. We were talking about them not long ago as potentially rivals to Ducati, and they are that. Don't get me wrong. I still think that bike overall is better than any Japanese bike at the moment, but a weird one from Aprilia, yeah.
I love the thought of Maverick Vinales is cross some kind of disease across to the mechanical side. The Maverick Vinales lurgy. Let's attack them.
That's what it feels like.
It does. It's a great analogy. I liked it. Yeah.
I also just want to touch on something. It has been speculated that Pramac Yamaha, as it will be next year, will announce Miguel Oliveira and Jack Miller either before this weekend in Misano or during. Your thoughts on those signings?
Yeah, where's Jake Dixon? He ought to be in there.
I
And
think
Yamaha have got a new Paolo Pavesio. It's taken over from Lynn Jarvis after 26 years of Lynn Jarvis's tenure as managing director of Yamaha Racing. We've got a new man that will be next year. He was originally, I think, the director of marketing and motorsport, some title like that, some long title anyway. But this, the new boy takes over. I'd like to see something a bit radical there, really.
I was actually going to lead in with that next, but then decided to pick up on this news. But it seems to have gone a little bit quiet on the whole Yamaha development front. Fabio Quartararo obviously crashing out on Sunday. Alex Rins not really doing too much to sing about. But you've not heard enough or much from their side for a while now. Initially, it looked as though they were chucking a lot at it, but it seems to have gone a bit quiet.
I think at Mugello we had that false dawn, didn't we? Where I think it was on the Friday where Alex Rins was second, I think, off the top of my head, and we were all like, "Oh, Yamaha, they definitely look like they're back." But since then, it's kind of just been a bit meh. On Oliveira and Miller, I think if you wanted a testing team out of all the riders that are available, there aren't really two better riders realistically that Pramac could have wanted. We know how well Miller is thought of in that Pramac setup. Whether that'll be the same on a Yamaha bike compared to a Ducati, it is interesting. Oliveira, I've always thought is an interesting one. He's gone to, I think it was 50-50 between him and Binder. A lot of people thought it was quite unfair when he was kind of chucked out of KTM for Miller, and he's not. I don't want to say he's underperformed compared to what I'd expect him to do at Trackhouse, but Raul Fernandez, you say, has been a good teammate for him. So I think it's interesting. If I was to get rid of, if we were to find a spot for Jake Dixon in that team, I'd rather Dixon be along Miller than Oliveira, purely just because I think that'd be comedy gold. And you'd get headlines and talking points for days with those two. But I think if you're being sensible, and I think Yamaha need to be sensible, I think Oliveira and Miller are probably the best way to go. Dixon, he's a great rider, but he knows very little about how to develop a MotoGP bike, if that makes sense. He's not had that experience on it compared to, obviously he's ridden one, but he's not got those years of experience of a Miller and Oliveira. So
okay, well that leads us nicely into talking about the Moto 2 and Moto 3 races this weekend. Let's pick up with Moto 2. Jake Dixon, he is just completely in his groove at the moment. We've said it before. It's such a shame that he had that crash in Qatar, because it's
Well, he's certainly got it sorted out now. I mean, after Silverstone, obviously, that's a big jump for him as well, winning the British Grand Prix. But that was a quality ride from the point of view that Tony Arbolino kept him honest all the way through it, and then towards the end of the race, he banged into really fast laps and just broke that toe to Arbolino. He had full control of it. It was a quality, classy ride from Jake Dixon. You can't say any more than that, really. He's marking his card. I mean, if he continues it's the kind of form that we wanted after the summer break, isn't it? To see Jake, he was building for it, to step to where he is now. He's made that step. If he can continue that through this year, somebody somewhere, I know there are hardly any seats going at the moment, but there are one or two on one-year deals during the course of the next year. Maybe he will miss out, I think, for 25, but 26, someone's going to get him signed up if he carries on the way he's going. And that championship, he could still make it work.
I don't want to say he's getting on, because that's a bit of an insult to someone who's I think he's 28 now. So it's, you don't want someone to have their proper, it's not even his debut season, but be announced for a next season at 28. It's not really for a team who wants to be building, as we see now with a lot of team projects. I don't want to say that his ship has sailed, because I think that if his ship has sailed, a Brit in MotoGP is years off. So I'd love to see him wild carding in MotoGP or anything like that. But in terms of a full-time seat, I really think that ship has gone. But in terms of this weekend, I think it's incredible. Second to none, just a well controlled performance. He knew what to do throughout the whole race, and yeah, I mean we saw him at the Great British Grand Prix, and that was a lot. Just talking to him after the race, that was a lot of fun, and obviously you see him dancing and whatnot. I don't think there's very few riders would do the worm or whatever he did this weekend in front of that amount of people. So yeah, fair play to him. He's got a big set of cojones on him, but yeah, he's a great guy.
There are other things that come into play, though, aren't there? I mean, the politics of things as well.
Yeah.
The fact that the Dorna Liberty will need a British Grand Prix rider. It's something that they've all been trying to push for God knows how long. And Jake Dixon is where he is in Moto2, purely simply because other people paid for him. At Dorna, they funded his position in Moto2. He's come up with the goods. I get what you're saying about age, but I've got to say that the sweet spot racing motorcycles for me is between 28 and 32. That's when you've got the raw talent meets the experience and the maturity to make it work for you. And with the physique of these guys nowadays, and the way that they train nowadays, 28 is nowhere near past it. And I understand what you're saying about the investment, if you like, in a rider over a period of time. But you still need fast guys. Ayagura's got that track house position. Would I have given it to him? No, I wouldn't have. Ayagura's a great rider, but I wouldn't have given it to him. I would have gone with Joe Roberts. Politically that would have made sense to me. Californian kid, we need an American in there. I think Joe could step up. And I think that's the other thing. Somkat Chantra has just got this position at the moment, which from where I'm at, it's gone down really, really well. Somkat, you got the first Thai Grand Prix, starts at the beginning of the year next year. It's the first Grand Prix of the year. Somkat Chantra is now riding a factory Honda, not a great motorbike, but he'll be racing with other Hondas, and that will be his position, is to try and beat the other Hondas. And, Somkat, he's not a youngster. It's a situation where, again, politically, financially, politically, geopolitically, it's what counts in MotoGP as a global sport nowadays. And Jake Dixon, we need a British runner in MotoGP. Dorna know it. I'm absolutely convinced that Liberty will know it as well. And there will be moves afoot. Frankie Carcetti doesn't manage Jake anymore, as I think I mentioned earlier. So it's a different management structure now. Can they put it together? Can Jake keep that momentum going so that they can't refuse him? If he comes out at the end of this year, if he can keep that momentum going, and no one knows it more than he does, I don't think age is something that's going to bar Jake Dixon from moving to MotoGP.
I mean, they mentioned it in the commentary, I think, as well. You've got all these title rivals who just seem to not want to win this championship at the minute as well. I mean, Garcia, he looked obviously a little heartbroken, maybe not the right word, but just completely distracted by the fact that he's not going to be in MotoGP next year. Aldeguer crashing again. Just none of these riders want to seem to win the championship. But if anyone's got the grit to do it, maybe Jake Dixon can sneak in there, which, I mean, we talk about comebacks, and this weekend has been the weekend of comebacks for Marquez. We could see one this season. It would be incredible to see Dixon win the world championship in Moto2, and it's not beyond the realms of possibility.
I think what Calum has picked out on, in terms of, traditionally speaking, there was a bit of a go-to where at one time it was pushing young riders through the classes as quickly as possible to get them to MotoGP, which you have to only assume that is, like you said, Keith, to try and get as much out of them as they possibly can. But I think in recent years, and for however long speaking, like, the geopolitical aspect has always been something. And there will be riders that find their way into MotoGP because of that, because the markets need a rider from each market. But Yeah, I'm wondering whether we are kind of taking a step back at the moment, and it doesn't just come down to age, and people are potentially waiting a little bit longer and letting riders sit for another year or so in Moto2 before they're chucked into MotoGP, and whether that's actually better. Because I tend to agree with you, Keith. I don't necessarily think sometimes throwing kids into MotoGP when they are as young as they have been is the right thing.
Well, the rules have changed, haven't they? And we've moved it all along 2 years now. It's 18 years old is now the minimum age for Grand Prix, whereas it was 16. In fact, it was 15 if you were a junior world champion or a rookies champion. So that's all changed. So I think that and that suits a British perspective. We're late developers. Too late in my case. We're very late developers, and I think that the opportunities come later for the British market, if you like, and probably in other countries as well. But the interesting part of that is it's all moved upstream by a couple of years, and I think you're right. I think that the emphasis that used to be on getting kids at sort of 13, 14, 15 is perhaps they've rolled that back a little bit. We've had obviously some fatalities and some serious injuries among very, very young kids, and there's something, not that it doesn't hurt if you get killed at any age, but it's for the family, but when it's a youngster, I mean, we all feel it just that little bit more acutely, I think. So I think Dorna have tried to take a bit of the whack out of that and halt the momentum of always trying to find the youngest, brightest star coming through and forcing them. You don't get a childhood. I always remember looking at Randy Momola back in the day. Randy Momola, when he first came to Europe, I mean, he was so incredibly young. And you just looked at him and thought, he's had no life. He's missed out that sort of 5 to 10 year period of graduation and girls and parties and all that stuff in the middle. Randy missed out. I mean, he's a fantastic personality, obviously now. But at that time, I used to look at him and think, you know what, I wouldn't want to be Randy. It was such an incredible focus at a time when, people still partied and people still did what they did as that particular age, and Randy never enjoyed any of that until much later in life. So I'm for it being a little bit later happening, and it favours the Brits.
Let's talk about Moto3 then. Jose Rueda took, I guess, a gamble with his tyre choice, but it paid off. Calum, what did you think of the Moto3 race? It's actually quite unusual to see those kind of elements and tactics come into a Moto3 race as much as they did this weekend.
It was a really weird Moto3 race. I mean, we thought David Alonso was going to do a Marc Marquez in essence and just, storm off into the distance. And then I think it was at 2 seconds and he kept it like that. And then it came down to about 1.3. And then it went back up again, I think, when Furasato had his purple patch and then disappeared back into the pack. And then it went back down to 1.3 and then it went back up to 2 again. And then I think it was the third time that it went under 2 seconds. And then Via just kept closing in and then brought everyone along with him. And Alonso just had no reaction. I think Rueda, it's been well known, is the 400th Grand Prix winner. So a bit of history for him. No one can take that away from him either. So it was a very interesting race and not one that I'd like to watch in Moto3 too often. I enjoy the chaos of Moto3. It kind of wakes me up in the morning. But a very educational race for a lot of these riders who will have seen how important it is to manage those tyres, even when, I don't think David Alonso would have thought that he was taking much out of those tyres, but he took too much out of them anyway. So it was very, very interesting, obviously, with it being the first race of the day as well. They didn't have any knowledge to go off, so almost into the unknown, but a very entertaining race. There isn't a championship on at all in that one. David Alonso, or you give him the trophy now, but nice to see a different winner, let's put it that way.
You're right about the unknown, that's for sure. With no warm-up and the like, diving in after a wet night onto a racetrack that is a bit tricky. It comes back under the heading, doesn't it? I mean, it leaves a bit of a lottery for people that can't run in a warm-up. I'm wholly against that. I think Moto3 and Moto2 should have warm-ups on race day mornings, for me anyway. And I'm sure a lot of riders and a lot of teams would prefer to see it back that way too. But hey, we get the MotoGP parade instead. Woo-hoo.
I think for all the reasons we spoke about just a moment ago as well. I mean, these are the guys with the least race experience. If you've had a crash in qualifying, you've got no time to go run that bike and see if everything's okay. And they're the youngest riders. Doesn't make any sense.
Well, I think we all agree with you, Amy.
It's not good, but we'll see how that one develops, because I'm sure something has got to change. There'll be enough people saying that's not the right thing to do, but who knows?
You just don't want it to be too early in the morning, I suppose, hey. But because they'll insist on putting this parade in there. So
you youngsters, you see, we used to have the 80cc riders starting their bloody motorbikes up at 7:30 in the morning, getting ready for their time out on track, when it used to be 80cc, 125cc, 250cc, 350cc, and then the 500s. You got good value for money when you came to a Grand Prix back in the old days.
I've not even done my TikTok morning scrolling that time in the morning, Keith. Let me let me wake up before that point. I need to have my avocado and poached eggs on toast.
Served. I bet you've got a butler as well, haven't you?
No, not yet. I wish.
You're not going to tell me your mum brings you it, are you? Now, go on.
No, I've moved out. I'm alone. I've moved away from the nest. I've flown the bird, but no, I've escaped that. But it would be nice if Mum wants to brings me a cup of tea in the morning. I wouldn't complain.
That reminds me of a Susie Perry interview that she did with the Marquez brothers, and Mark was talking about the magic box. That we throw our clothes in there, and in the morning they're gone, and they're on the bed all pressed and ready.
I do miss that.
And that was coming from the Marquez brothers, so they live like the rest of us did once.
I do miss that. That would be quite fun.
Well, Keith will be back on Thursday with the official Misano preview. But as we've got you here now, Calum, just your thoughts going into next weekend and obviously the season ahead. What do you think is going to pan out?
Can they please do something different in the second race? I don't know what, but can they, is there something different they can do? Because, I mean, bless Honda and Yamaha riders, they're going to be able to do this blindfolded come the sprint race, aren't they? I think Bagnaia will be out to almost make a statement after that. I think, it's nice for him to get back on the bike straight away. He'll be able to just refocus that energy. I do think Bagnaia, through whether it be politics of not wanting the number one plate to be on an Aprilia next year or whatnot, I do think Bagnaia will go on and win the World Championship. And I think it'll be a bit chaotic. It will go down to the last race as always. But I can't shake this feeling that Martin still has important mistakes in him that cost him more points. So yeah. Don't play this again at the end of the season at all, and come back and tell me that I got it wrong. But no, I'll go with Bagnaia to keep the World Championship. But Marquez next year, if you want a 2025 prediction, this weekend has kind of it's thrown the cat amongst the pigeons and made that a lot more juicy than even any of us thought it would be.
I'm still reeling from my predictions last weekend, so I ain't going to bother with any this week. I don't think at all. I mean, I kind of got it around the wrong way, didn't I? With I thought Jorge Martin might find himself sliding up the road, and it was his main rival that ended up being taken out. But look, I mean, I think
actually,
sorry,
Keith, the great powers that be. When I say the great powers that be, I mean Harry. Everybody will know Harry has made a small request that we choose our rider of the round. So, before I let you boys go, Keith, you go first. Who would your rider of the round be?
Jake Dixon. Come on, Keith, mate.
Oh, you're absolutely
give me the easy answer. Give me the easy answer.
That was there. That was on the tip of my tongue, and he's Jake Dixon. No, I mean Jake had a fantastic ride at the weekend, and I would have picked him for the weekend actually as a rider of the way he controlled it. But you can't get away from the fact that Marc Marquez was just superb throughout. I know I'm going to get the fanboy image, and everyone's going to be trolling me like mad in the comment sector below. Troll away, folks, but there is no doubt about it. Marc Marquez was outstanding. He's a fantastic sportsman, and he's back on the map with Grand Prix wins. He dominated the weekend on an old motorbike in an independent team, and there was no one in his stratosphere.
I think there's an argument for Martin because he didn't throw it up the road, because it feels like the type of race where a year ago he would have done. But I mean, as well, even Jake Dixon, he had a great week. But no, it has to be Marc Marquez, just on another planet.
Listen, guys, thank you so much for your company. Keith, you will be back a little bit later on this week with the Misano preview. If you are listening along to our podcast, please do remember to like, subscribe. It does make a huge difference to all sorts of things, but mainly so we can get some awesome guests to join us over the winter and in the episodes coming up. Also take a look at our Patreon memberships and YouTube memberships. We've got something exciting in the pipeline, which we will tell you about very, very shortly, but well worth checking out. And like I said, we'll be back later on this week with the Misano preview. So thanks for your company, and we'll speak to you soon.